you, Robert, because I found it interesting. I first heard about you when you were on Rogan, and I listened to the full episode. It was on Spotify, and I was happy to see Rogan having you on and having conversations that I had actually wished he was having a year earlier, and I thought it was really positive. But I hadn't really heard much of you before that. And then in preparing for this, it's very hard to get any information about you out there because everything you said seemed to have been removed. And then, of course, negative information out there about you. But when you spoke on Rogan, you know, you have a very calm sense about you. Like you said, you know, you're very objective. And I was surprised that you've been vilified so much or been such a target of the defamation, et cetera. And I was wondering if that surprised you, and do you think it's for the simple reason because you have this pedigree of credibility unlike other people, or have you made sense of your own censoring?
So I don't obsess over it too much. It's just a fact of life.
Your episode of Rogan was removed from Spotify as well, right?
No, it's still there,
okay.
But good luck finding it.
Yeah. Well, good luck finding anything.
You cannot find it through Google.
Yeah. Well, good luck finding anything on Spotify through Google.
Yeah. I think it's number 1757 or 759. And if you know the Spotify number, then you can search Rogan and that number and Spotify, and you'll pull it.
I couldn't find it on Spotify search.
Yeah, I know. You can't. So you have to know the specific episode number.
Okay. So that's not a Google thing. That even Spotify search tries to delist it. Okay. But it's up there still for whatever that's worth. Okay.
Yep, it is. And there's many mirrored sites.
Right.
So it's still there. And it was, of course, amazingly, I mean, what a bizarre world. I get catapulted from running a small, basically two-person consulting shop for decades, trying to keep my head down, as they say in DC. If they can't see you, they can't shoot you. And that's just kind of been my modus in a world in which I was already kind of blacklisted because of what I had done early, which was just politically inconvenient for various people that wanted to take credit for it. And people in San Diego with the old company that I was at, and people at Penn, et cetera. The people that tried so hard to get the Nobel Prize.
For the mRNA research you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
So
my mentor, when I was a graduate student, when I left the lab, told me that I would never get an NIH grant if I left at that time. And that is the case. He's an incredibly powerful individual in science.
Okay.
So I've kind of understood big science all the way through. How do I make sense of this? The trivial is the euphemism, if you're over the target, you catch the flak. It appears that my pedigree may have, and it may be part of, also wrapped around my tone and kind of delivery that's just native. I've spent decades in highly competitive academic environments, right at the forefront of some pretty controversial areas like gene therapy, and I've learned. I guess I'm kind of battle hardened there. I mean, academics can be pretty wicked.
Yeah.
So when all this hit, there's something about my voice and my tone and tenor that seems to reach people. And I'm still, it's a mystery to me. It just is. I think the combination of the CV, my deep knowledge of the government and the intelligence community, my willingness to speak freely about truth, ethics, etc. In something about my delivery and reach really triggered the press. to go crazy. I don't know what else to say. I mean, they just went over the top. Early on, Jill and I, my partner in all things and wife, Dr. Jill Glassblum, who's a co-author on the book, but not listed as such, but attributed in the front piece. When we encountered what happened after Brett Weinstein and what was happening in the press with the attempts to delegitimize and write me out of history, I mean, Wikipedia and everything else, there was a concerted effort to write me out of history. And we spent some time thinking about it and came to the decision that we weren't going to let them get away with this. I had interacted with press for decades, almost always on background, except in the case of the Jesse Gelsinger death at UPenn, which is the gene therapy death that was so famous, where I came out because my ethics professor told me I had an obligation to. And so I said, yes, sir, and destroyed my career then. We looked at what was happening and made the decision that I would just throw myself into alternative media and throw myself into the podcast. It was a steep learning curve, and still so much to learn. But I would accept any podcast from anybody. I mean, I was on some pretty weird special interest groups, crystals and tours of Mexican pyramids and all kinds of things that I'll never forget. Each podcaster really represents a different community, which has been a fantastic journey for me, learning culturally. But that's what we did. It was a conscious decision that we would bypass corporate media by diving into alternative media, learning that new alternative media. I don't have the many-year history that you have. I've had to learn on the fly very quickly, and that proved to be a pretty effective strategy. As I mentioned, I don't want to brag the earlier numbers. We're hitting some big numbers now. Rogan obviously was crucial, and fascinating that I was at about 500,000 Twitter followers and about 150,000 on LinkedIn, and I was summarily deplatformed with no excuse and no warnings 2 days before I went on Rogan. That's kind of fascinating. And we won't, the Twitter files you mentioned, the Twitter files relating to COVID have been delayed. And according to Elon, they're to drop sometime this month. We're currently recording on February 1st of 2023. So sometime in theory this month, I don't know who is the individual that apparently had trouble scheduling a trip to Silicon Valley to view them. I can only hope it's not Alex Berenson, but it is whoever Elon has chosen. And we'll await that. But so that's what we did, was we just threw ourselves into alternative media and learning about the techniques that were being deployed, hence the fifth gen warfare understanding, and kind of living it on a daily basis. These days, I spend more and more time trying to teach people what is fifth gen warfare as a way to empower them.
Yeah.
So the good news is it's actually not very expensive. It's very decentralized. It's ideally leaderless, and they can do it to us, but we can do it back to them too. And we don't have to spend big bucks to do it. We just, as I said in Stockholm, the 4th PSYOP division of the U.S. Army, which are the folks that did the inflatable tanks to distract the Germans.
Yeah.
during World War II. Among other things, the Ghost Army was the term. There are about 800 soldiers. And I was speaking to the conference in Stockholm, and I said, look, you're 1,300 people. You're already, just here in this room, bigger than that 4th PSYOP division of the U.S. Army. Let's just apply common sense. It normally takes a decade or more to produce a vaccine that is safe and effective, and to demonstrate that it's safe. The usual standard with the FDA is that you allow at least 2 years after you have administered the phase 3 material to at least 3,000 people for a vaccine. Often the FDA wants many more people than that. And you follow them for 2 years at least to see whether or not they're generating autoimmune problems, etc. And you're dead on. I mean, any of you can do the math, okay? Have shortcuts been taken? Normally it takes 3 years to evaluate the data. This was deployed in 8 months, 6 months or less after the phase 3 trials were completed. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out the common sense that we don't have the information. In terms of safety in pregnancy, reproductive toxicology, reproductive risks, potential birth defects, the honest truth is, whatever they tell you, we don't have the data. So whomever is speaking, if they're telling you that it's safe, but they haven't actually done the studies, I think you can figure out that that means that they're not being, let's see, gently truthful with you.
Were women even included, were pregnant women even included in the clinical trials?
Of course they weren't. The NIH just funded the study like a week ago on reproductive toxicology and birth defects in children. The study, the major study on potential risks in pregnancy, wasn't started until after, about almost a month after, the CDC said it's okay to go ahead and start taking the vaccine. Here's what I do know about multiple boosters. The immune system is really, really complex. And it's as complex as the nervous system, which, by the way, comes from the same cell type. Incredibly complex. And one thing, as somebody that's been in this business and had all this stupid training for 30 years, more is not better. The assumption that another dose is going to boost your immunity to levels that it was previously needs to be demonstrated clearly, and the safety of that needs to be demonstrated. Because as immunologists, we know darn well there's a thing called high zone tolerance. More is not better. More can actually suppress the immune response.
After the extra shots, we're seeing the depletion of certain cell types. To your point, we're starting to document it and studying it. And to his question, why give a third shot to a virus that was gone in January and February of this year? We're on to Delta. The booster is not something new. It's the same shot for the virus that's gone. Delta's a new virus, essentially. So is there any logic to boost something that's not even here anymore? No.
A newly peer-reviewed study from the Cleveland Clinic found that the risk of COVID-19 varied by the number of COVID-19 vaccine doses previously received. And the higher the number of vaccines previously received, the higher the risk of contracting COVID-19.
Popular YouTuber and comedian who has been a prominent skeptic over vaccines and mandates throughout the pandemic, Jimmy Dore, tweeted, "FYI, it's not a vaccine, it's a failed experiment. We are the guinea pigs." All right.
to the spread of misinformation and fake news, believe it or not, are divided by an extremely thin line. Many fail to understand the difference, and sometimes even the social media platforms themselves have no clue as to what are facts and what is essentially fake news. And this is a controversy in which Twitter now seems to be mired in. The social media giant's latest move has sparked a massive storm. Believe it or not, this is what Twitter has done. The Twitter account of a leading US virologist, Dr. Robert Malone, has now been suspended by Twitter. But who is Dr. Robert Malone? Now, Robert Malone happens to be the inventor of the mRNA technology that is being used to vaccinate millions of people around the world. So we're talking about a researcher who has come up with the mRNA technology of making vaccines. But believe it or not, Twitter, in its wisdom, has decided to suspend the account of a scientist who's come up with the mRNA vaccine, and it claims it has done this because he was allegedly spreading misinformation on COVID-19 vaccines. Let that sink in.